move on to War of the Worlds, 1953. This is directed by Byron Haskin, who worked with Hitchcock and Michael Powell, and produced by the great George Powell, one of the great fantasy and science fiction film pioneers. Few details of Wells's original novel remain. The setting is changed to California. Well, that doesn't mean anything, folks. This is a remarkably effective movie. The invasion is genuinely frightening. The scenes of shattered cities are a very, very bleak vision indeed. The Martian war machines are changed from walking tripods to manta ray-like flying saucers with snake-like heat ray projectors that blast the surroundings into rubble. These spaceships with these manta ray flying saucers with their snake-like heat ray projectors are virtual icons of cinema. The final attack on LA is very, very impressive. There's great special effects, spectacular special effects in this George Powell produced movie. It's an icon of science fiction cinema. It's a well-paced movie that generates excitement. Essentially, the Martian war machines, the Martian invasion, has dazed humanity. Humanity is in mass confusion, and they retreat back into religious faith. God essentially saves the day in the movie The War of the Worlds because the people are praying for a miracle as the world is being destroyed around them, and they get that miracle. Microbes that were placed by God on Earth ultimately defeat the Martian invasion. I highly recommend you see this movie. It has great special effects. It's a really, really well-paced, fast-moving film. And, well, it's very, very entertaining. I highly recommend you see War of the Worlds. All right, let's get to another George Powell movie. This is The Time Machine, 1960. Powell both produced and directed this one. Well, this movie stars Rod Taylor and Yvette Menu, Alan Young, and Sebastian Cabot. The film ignores the social parodies and implications of the original novel. Well, so what? This is a great movie anyway. This movie is an awful lot of fun, folks. It's set in the Victorian era during the beginning of the film. Victorian bric-a-brac are all over the place. The cozy world of the high-class Victorian era is recreated perfectly. An inventor, Rod Taylor, demonstrates his creation, the time machine, to his disbelieving friends. The time machine is essentially a charming design. It's unforgettable. I actually have a miniature in front of me right now. It's a die-cast model that I've had for many, many years, and I virtually treasure. I'll never get rid of this. It's a visually interesting journey through time. These sequences are done extremely well. The special effects are great. It's really, really done well. The future world of the working-class Trog-like Morlocks and the beautiful but thoughtless Eloi are recreated to some extent. However, the disturbing evolutionary perspectives that are in the book are missing. As I mentioned, so what? The time traveler, Rod Taylor, once he gets to the future, becomes a confident, romantic hero who rouses the Eloi to do battle with their ape-like devourers, the Morlocks. This movie may be formula sci-fi, but it works. This formula works extremely well, and I highly recommend this movie. It may not be the novel, but it stands on its own as first-rate entertainment. I highly recommend you see The Time Machine from 1960. All right, let's move on to First Men in the Moon. This is 1964. This is directed by Nathan Giron. and stars Lionel Jeffries and Martha Heyer. This is a watered-down version of the Wells novel. There's a lot of low farce in the first hour. It takes a long time to get going. But once it gets to the moon, it's a really, really good movie. Essentially, an eccentric Victorian inventor develops an anti-gravity device and flies to the moon in a spherical ship that's powered by this anti-gravity device that he discovers. Well, once they get to the moon, they're captured by insect-like moon people, Selenites, who, the Earthlings eventually escape, but they leave behind cold germs that wipe out the moon's population because they have no immunity to these cold germs. So this is a movie that's basically a mixture of low farce and slaughter of the Selenites or moon people. This film is a giant showcase for Ray Harryhausen's special effects. The Moon Men, the sets, are excellent. There's also a 1919 Gaumont production, a silent production of First Men in the Moon, that sadly I must admit I have never seen. I'm trying to track down the 1919 version. I'm very curious about it. If I ever see it, if we ever track it down, we'll try and put it up on our YouTube channel. I can't make any promises on that, but I'm doing what I can. All right, let's move on to Food of the Gods. This is 1976. Now, this has no relation to the novel. This is essentially a rat-drowning epic, a revenge of nature film that's directed by Bert I. Gordon and stars Marjo Gortner, Pamela Franklin, Ida Lupino, and Ralph Meeker. Well, a marvelous foodstuff oozes from the ground and causes gigantism in the creatures who eat it. There's animated wasps, there's plastic caterpillars, there's out-of-focus giant chickens, and there's rats shot in miniature sets that are all very, very unconvincing. The special effects are below par in this film. Ralph Meeker is the best thing in the movie. He gives a very creepy and effective performance as a wicked industrialist who wants to exploit the foodstuff. I cannot recommend this film. It's really good for a few laughs, but it's a pretty dismal movie. All right, let's move on to The Island of Dr. Moreau. This is 1977. It's directed by Don Taylor. Stars Burt Lancaster, Michael York, and Barbara Carrera. This movie is handsomely produced, but slow-moving in spots. The critters are pretty neat-looking. The special effects are pretty good. The makeup's pretty good. It's in the Planet of the Apes mode. There's a lot of plastic makeup, but it looks pretty good. And while this movie is a bit of a disappointment, it's worth watching. Lancaster gives a very solid performance as the demented doctor who carries out his, evil experiments to give animals human characteristics. The hybrids live in the jungle, but they're formed by genetic engineering in this film, by DNA splicing, not by vivisection like in the original novel. Barbara Carrera is a lovely panther woman. She's a strikingly beautiful woman and a pretty good actress who infuses the panther woman with an element of sadness that is very, very appealing. All right, there's also a 1978 television version of The Time Machine that's directed by Henry, what the hell's his name? Sharap, I believe. That features John Beck and Priscilla Barnes. This is a very forgettable film, a very inferior television remake. I cannot recommend it. I don't believe it's out on DVD. It was out on video many years ago. I saw it in the mid-1980s. And to be honest with you, I can't remember a damn thing about it. All right, let's move on to Time After Time. This is 1979. This is not exactly a true Wells film, but it's a charming movie that features Malcolm McDowell as H.G. Wells. and David Warner as Jack the Ripper. There's good moments in this ingenious film, and the talented actors give great performances. Mary Steenburgen is also in this film. Wells is portrayed as a fish out of water who is both baffled and amazed by the future. He's very disappointed that the future is not the socialist utopia that he envisioned. Well, Jack the Ripper, David Warner, eludes the police by stealing H.G. Wells' time machine. This is happening in the 1880s. And Jack the Ripper travels back to San Francisco in 1979. And when the machine returns, Wells follows the criminal into the future. Now, Wells may be a fish out of water. He doesn't like the future that he lands into. But Jack the Ripper loves the 20th century. He likes the sleaze and he likes the violence of the 20th century. He feels that he's at home in the future. This is a really, really enchanting movie. I highly recommend it. It's directed by Nicholas Meyer, who does a really good job with several genre films, and he does a really good job in Time After Time. Now, sadly, Time After Time was the last good lead role that Malcolm McDowell ever got, which is really tragic because he's a fine actor who was virtually wasted by Hollywood. McDowell has been regulated to B-movies and direct-to-video fare for decades now, and it's really a shame because he's a really, really good actor who seldom gets a role worthy of his talent. All right, let's move on to The Island of Dr. Moreau.